Shalom Alechem, Beruchim Habayim. Welcome everybody to our ongoing series in, if you will, the mystical teachings of the Talmud. We entitled this series, How to Live a Godly Life, because what is mysticism without godliness and goodliness, being godliness? Anyway, we are concluding now, tonight, a series of lessons that we have done from the Tractate Sanhedrin on the topic of the coming of the Messiah. So this is part 6 in that series. Just to timestamp us, it is the 27th of June 2012, and we are of course on the countdown to the end of time, December 21st of this year, less than 6 months away. So just in case we're not here in 6 months from now, it's been nice knowing you, but like I've taught, I think that what's going to happen after December 21st is probably December 22nd, but I gave a whole class on that, believe it or not, over a year ago. You go on to the online video and audio selections at KosherTorah.com and you can see that. But anyway, getting back to our material here. Before I introduce the last of the material that I'm going to talk about on this topic, we're going to be reading from our Finkel edition of the Ein Yaakov, Legends of the Talmud, selections which I've chosen from page 665, 666, 667, and a couple of other things from other sections not from Tractate Sanhedrin. Because summing up this material, I obviously want to cover that which we have not yet discussed and review that which we have to put this within a context. You see, if you will remember, the entire concept of what we today call apocalypse came out of a specific genre of Jewish literature which was predominant in a specific period of time. While we have clear Messianic predictions in Isaiah and other biblical prophets, beginning with the period of the Babylonian exile, in which we had the writings of Daniel, and then following immediately thereafter in the writings of like Zechariah. These are the places where we have the beginning of apocalypse. You will not really find that much reference to apocalypse in the earlier prophets. They spoke of the time of the Mashiach, great changes. If you remember the most beautiful words of Isaiah, the lion will lay down with the lamb. They will beat their swords into They shall beat their swords into plows and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall no longer rise up against nation, etc., etc. All those are beautiful words, needless to say, not having ever been accomplished yet. One of the major Jewish contentions why we say the Messiah has not yet come, but let's not get into theology or argumentative theology with others who hold differently, and you know who I mean. So anyway, my point is, the Messianic concept fell upon us within this apocalyptic setting from those who had the Merkava experience of being able to foresee, if you will, what we call the end of days. And as a point that I've made in previous classes, the end of days is not only a period in time, it is a more so period of psychology and psychological evolution prior to humanity evolving beyond what we can call humanity's childhood into humanity's adulthood. And there's an interesting point made by the famous psychologist Carl Jung, where I can just paraphrase, because forgive me, I don't remember the exact quote, where he says that any psychological growth is barred by irrational fears and violent prejudice. And so, as humanity is going to take the next step into, I will use the proper term, evolution, all of humanity feels deep within this change. And as Jung said, it is met with violent opposition, radical prejudice. And that's why you see such extremism and radicalism and all these other types of doom and gloom scenarios so predominant within the modern psyche. So that would therefore make us draw the conclusion that we're now living in the end of days. I would tend to agree with that. But a point that I've made in our earlier classes, that you have had the writings of the mystics like the Ariel back in the 1500s who said that they were then living in the end of days. So the end of days has been going on now for, close to 450 years. Those are long ends of days. But remember, being that this is a psychological phenomena and not necessarily want to be marked on a calendar, the time of the end of days is fluid. And as quantum physics understands the fundamental reality that nothing is actually established and finite until it is observed, then indeed the scenario of exactly how things will occur is not yet definitive and settled until ultimately it occurs. And that is why to try to mark on a calendar specific Messianic predictions and a timeline and the like cannot be done. Simply because in the quantum reality of things, the specific form of how things will proceed, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, is not written. And technically never is. But yet, the evolutionary process in general is known, even though the details are not. And that is what we must conclude and understand when we're discussing the things that the Talmud does. The Talmud is teaching us many details, many of which we could see in our day. But in all due respect, as the Talmud itself has said, a lot of those things are understood to be happening in many a day, in many a time. Oh well, this is the point. Why am I emphasizing this even before we begin? Because even though we are convinced today, 2012, with all the awe that year has been told us, there's no guarantees of anything. Right now, and again, time dating ourselves to the 27th of June, 2012, things in the Middle East look pretty grim. There's terrible civil war pretty much going on in Syria. There has been already conflict between Syria and Turkey, and who knows where that's going to lead, and other things are happening. Maybe a year from now, someone's going to listen to this recording and will be able to look back and say, World War III already happened. Maybe it will. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. I don't know. I'm not convinced. And therefore, I am not willing to, if you will, put all my eggs in the same basket, gamble my last dollar, that the Messiah is coming imminently, and that we better be ready now, because there is no future, there is no tomorrow. Sorry, I don't believe that. I do believe there is a tomorrow. And when the Mashiach comes, or how human civilization is going to transit from where we are to where we will be, well, maybe it will come through the destruction. Or maybe it won't. That only time, observation, and therefore definitiveness will decide. Take this, please, as the conclusion at this series, so that you can walk away from this optimistic as opposed to pessimistic. Because ultimately, the jury's still out, as we say. We don't know exactly yet what will be, when it will be, how it will be. And I've heard many people ask me, Rabbi, is there anything we can do to make the Messiah come in peace, as opposed to war? And my answer is, well, I don't think so, because I think that's part of the general scenario of things that has been ordained beyond us. So then I'm asked, well, what hope there is there? To which I respond, hope for the world in general, the world has to evolve. We have a number of women here in this class, and I will ask any one of you women who are mothers, do you remember the birthing process? Do you remember your dilation, your pushing, your screaming? Well, the coming of the Mashiach is called the birth pangs. You know that you're going to pray God a healthy baby, but you also know that it's got to come out. Well, that's evolution. Consider it not an act of death, but an act of life. New life. So somehow, somewhere, it will happen. We look all around us, we live in a really messed up world. Not just messed up in the Middle East, we're messed up everywhere. I was just sharing before we began our class with one of our students who is with us live from Paris, France. And I applaud him that it's 3 a.m. in the morning and he's here with us live. God bless him. And we're talking about the new president, Monsieur Aharon, and all of the new socialist agenda that he wishes to institute to try to address the European economic issues. Who knows where that's going to lead? Ultimately, everything right now is in just such a precarious state that anything can set off anything, anywhere, at any time. Only God knows. So, this brings us into exactly where I want to introduce to us tonight's material. On page 665, in our Finkel edition, it's called here The Birth Pangs of Mashiach. And Rob says, the Mashiach will not come until the empire has extended its reign over the Jews for 9 months, as it says, and he quotes here, therefore, he will deliver them to their enemies, if you will, until the time that a woman is in labor gives birth. 9 months. And then the rest of Mashiach's brothers will return to the land of Israel with the other tribes of the children of Israel. Now, this is that correlation or relationship to, again, the giving of birth. Now, this what Rob is saying here, that the Rome, or the empire, will rule over Israel, the period of 9 months, is the process of the pregnancy, the evolution, and growth of the child until its birth. Don't look at that as a literal time of 9 months. Don't start marking it from March or June or July or December. Forget that. It's a symbolic reference to a period of development and growth. Understand it spiritually, or more practically, psychologically. How long then is this 9-month period? It all depends on how long it takes for the, in quote, child to be born. The child being the new world. Not the new world order of all the conspiracy theories, but rather the true child. That is what's being referred to here. Then will be the fulfillment. So again, if you understand these words correctly, we're speaking about a birthing process. Ladies, you understand that like no man ever will. So Ula now says, let Mashiach come. let me not see him. In other words, I don't want to be there when all this goes down. Ula had rather not be present during the intense sufferings that precedes his coming. And Rabbah too said, let the Mashiach come, but let me not see him. But Rabbi Yosef said, let him come, and may I be worthy to sit in the shadow of his donkey's dung. Now, the first two rabbis said, look, we recognize the apocalyptic nature of the eventuality of the evolution of humanity beyond its childhood. And therefore, knowing how difficult a period this will be for the vast majority, I don't want to be there. I've written about this. Ask yourselves, as great as it will be to see the fulfillment of a comprehensive new world, wherein which, at the harmonic level, hostility is gone. Where literally the lion will lay down with the lamb. Where literally there will be peace. Where your most bitterest enemy, where Al-Qaeda will look to the Jew as if both have awakened from a dream to say, brother, what have we been doing? Oh, wouldn't that be great? Oh, I would love to see that. But it's not going to come around by magic. The old will be destroyed before the new will come. The individual, you or me, maybe, will pass through. But the world must go through what it must go through. So this is what Rabbi Yosef is referring to. When it goes, I should only be worthy of whatever, even to sit in the shadow of his donkey's dung. Right? Halavai! I should just be there. But Abaye now asks Rabbah, why don't you want to see Mashiach's coming? Are you? Is it because you're afraid of the pangs associated with his coming? But did we not learn in a Baraita that Rabbi Elazar was asked by his students, what can a person do to escape the birth pangs of Mashiach? And he replied, let him get involved in the study of Torah and in acts of kindness. Now remember what Perek Helek says, that the purpose of learning is for the doing. And the emphasis on the doing isn't just rituals between you and God to get brownie points, but rather what we call the mitzvot ben adam lechavero, the commandments which we interact, which I should say govern the interaction of human beings. In my statement of principles that I have available on KosherTorah.com, if you've not read them, I encourage you please to read them. I outline what I believe to be the appropriate, proper behavior that must guide us in our relationships with everybody else. And in that respect, we must never distinguish between human beings created in God's image, based upon our designs of differences in religion, culture, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, or anything of the kind. I don't necessarily agree with, embrace, or endorse anything, but I will yet extend respect, because I believe that is just what is the right thing to do. Respect does not mean agreement and embracement. It's kind of like, if you will, live and let live, or loving kindness. And I extend that pretty much everything, including a lot of which I do not endorse or agree with personally or from Torah. And I encourage you to be the same. We have no room for racism, separatism, division, arrogance. Just earlier before this class this evening, I read an email from a reader who asked me why we Jews think we're better than everyone else. And I responded, gosh, I never read anything in the Bible that does say that the nation of Israel is chosen by God, but nowhere does that choice make Israel better. Not at all. I know a lot of good Jews, that's true. I probably know a lot more good non-Jews. Just the sheer number. We're different in mission, but we're not different in being. So those of you who sit on your high horse or your pedestal saying, I am a this and I am a that and therefore I am better, no, you're not. You're arrogant. You're a human being. So are we all. Your behavioral choices might be better than another. And it's those things that you do which define your betterment. So look in the mirror. Don't define who I am other than by what I do. That is the secret here of loving kindness and living Torah. So again, when Rabbah was saying here, Torah study and acts of kindness, right? He says, if you do this, what are you afraid of? And Rabbah said, I am afraid that a sin may erase whatever merits I have earned. Now, you don't know Rabbah. He's a big religious, spiritual, holy guy. And yet even he says, I'm afraid I slip up. Well, I'm going to make a confession to all of you tonight. I, the great and holy Rebbe who's giving you this class, I confess I have slipped up in my life. I have made mistakes. I am only a human being with all my frailties. And I thank God for that. This is why I love studying the Torah, the Tanakh, the Bible, and the Talmud. Because the role models of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, Solomon, prophets, the great sages of whom we read here in this book. These are mortal human beings like you and me who make mistakes just like you and me, who are subject to trials and tribulations just like you and me, and who sometimes fall flat on their faces just like you and me, and who sometimes make wrong choices just like you and me. So what do I love about the Torah, the Bible, the Talmud? Is that the individuals who might make the wrong choice or fall on their faces get up, dust themselves off, and move forward. And learn from their mistakes and move forward to betterment. That to me is the best example and role model that we can have. Simply because we're human, they're human, we learn from one another how to improve our humanity. That is Rabbah's message right here. And again, it says, this is in line with the teachings of Rabbi Yaakov ben Idi. For Rabbi Yaakov ben Idi pointed out a contradiction. It says that God promised Jacob, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go. Genesis 28:5. But then it says that Jacob was very frightened and distressed. Genesis 32:8. So he said, in spite of God's promises to protect him, he was afraid that a sin may eliminate God's protection. So you know something? We can't go living in fear. However, we should always know that we have to strive to be the best we can. And like I always tell people, there are no promises. There are no promises of salvation, redemption, and guarantee. I'm not talking about the world to come, I'm talking about through the hard times to come. The only thing we can do is the best we can with what we've got. Understand and learn that this is the Talmudic message. We know it's coming. Whenever it gets here, maybe in our lifetimes, maybe this year. Then again, maybe not. But like Maimonides summarized with regards to the principle of the coming of Messiah, we say, although we may tarry, we wait daily. We hope and pray for the healthy birth of the new child. Symbolic, of course, meaning of the new era, the new evolution of humanity. I pray to see that day. But now, I'm skipping down in our book here, turning to page 666. And under the topic, what is Mashiach's name? Now, this is a very interesting topic, simply because, especially in light of many Christian claims, that the Messiah, of course, in their view, was Yeshu. Alright? Many say that the name of the Mashiach is to be Yeshua or anything of the kind. Well, just for the record, the historical man who lived, his name most likely was not Yeshua, as many of the Jewish converts to Christianity claim. Simply because in those days their names were Aramaic. And therefore the Aramaic form of Yeshua was Yeshu. And that was his name. And in all due respect with regards to Yeshu, I probably take a much more liberal view of him historically than many of my peers. I look at the teachings about Yeshu, whether found in the Talmud or other midrashic literature, to be after-the-fact responses to Christian missionary attacks that began in the 2nd century from non-Jewish believers who were starting a philosophical movement based upon Yeshu that his own original Jewish historical followers, Peter, James, John, would not recognize. Indeed, when the Gentile following of Yeshu grew and developed into the Catholic Church, they considered the original teachings of Yeshu's historical followers, Peter, James, John, to be heretical. And they excommunicated the teachings and the people involved. So gosh, we have our own Masorah teaching that Yeshu was actually a very violent and a radical extremist in his day. And that the real reason of the sages' rejection of him had nothing to do with him calling himself a Messiah. Because remember, a Messiah was a political leader. But rather, due to his violent nature, is what they feared. And as we proceed in our series, in the series that will follow this one, being that now, time-wise, we're going into the period of the commemoration of the destruction of Jerusalem, we're going to go into Tractate Gittin to discuss many of the stories that happened in those days. And of course, we're going to have to get into the issues of the historical Yeshu, because they were very much involved in those things. But now let's get back to our Gemara here on page 666. What is Mashiach's name? So the yeshiva, the school of Rabbi Chiya, said that the name of Mashiach is Shiloh. And they quote the verse, because until Shiloh comes. But at the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, they said his name is Yinon. Because it says, may his name endure forever. May his name connote mastery as long as the sun endures. And again, the word Yinon is there. And of course, the yeshiva of Rabbi Hanina says his name is Hanina, which means mercy. Because they again quote a verse, for I will give you mercy, Hanina. Now, what the blank is all of this about? Are they arguing with one another? No. What they're doing is something really simple. They are doing a traditional Jewish, even Middle Eastern beyond Jewish, act of respect. That the highest appellation they could give to the, in quote, coming king or the highest person is the representative of that highest person in their personal lives, which is their own teacher, their master, their rabbi. So therefore, obviously, the school of so-and-so is going to say, well, Messiah's name obviously has to be so-and-so because he's a representative. Our teacher is a representative of Mashiach, so Mashiach should be called by his name. No, it doesn't mean that they actually think that the name is Shiloh or Yinon or Hanina, but it's a specific act of respect. And that is how we must understand this type of teaching. And yet, it continues and says, and some say the name of Mashiach is Menachem ben Chizkiah. And then he quotes here, because a comforter to revive my spirit is far from me, quoting Lamentations. You will find in much later midrashic literature Mashiach ben David, the son of David, is always referred to here as Menachem. They say that is his name. No, that doesn't mean that will actually be his name, but that's the name that is used in many of the works, specifically Sefer Zerubbabel. But now, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, in the future, the Holy One, blessed be He, will raise another David for the Jewish people. Of course, Mashiach was the son of David. Because it says, they will serve God, their Lord, and David, their king, whom I will raise up for them. Jeremiah 30, verse 9. It does not say he raised, meaning the original, but I will raise, meaning another one. And Rabbi Papa said in the name of Abaye, but it says, my servant David will be prince over them forever, according to Ezekiel 37:25. And it seems to imply that the original King David is the one who will reign over the Jewish people in the future. The Gemara says that it will be kind of like a Caesar and a deputy Caesar, or like having two people there. Now, you shrug your shoulders and go, yeah, okay. But you don't recognize what this is getting at. Oh, this is such a subtle little reference here, because most people don't recognize the relationship of this verse with the concept of two Messiahs. I am not referring to Messiah son of David and Messiah son of Joseph, who are the ones known today. But little is known that prior to the concept and development of the Messiah son of Joseph, the predominant expected Messiah was the Messiah of the house of Aharon, of the priesthood, Mashiach ben Aharon. There's supposed to be two of them. Because if you look in Ezekiel, it speaks about the Nasi, the prince, that's the one being spoken of, who goes in and out of the temple. Someone of the house of David isn't going in and out of the temple. House of David sits in his throne. The one going in and out of the temple is the high priest. The high priest in the days of the Messianic era is called Mashiach ben Aharon. He is called the prince. He is the conduit of heaven and earth. And David is the king on the earth. Look at the difference between them as having horizontal versus vertical authority. That's the relationship. Now I have a lesson about the three Messiahs on Kosher Torah for those who wish to pursue it there. But it's an interesting topic, delegated today to, if you will, the footnotes of history. But ultimately, the true Kohen Tzadok, as he is called in Talmudic literature, must come. And no, that is not Elijah the prophet, or a prophet. It has to be a priest. Who else can sacrifice the new red heifer when the time comes to cleanse us of our ritual impurities, to enable us to be ritually clean, to perform all the ritual matters that will need to be in those days? So, subtle little reference here to that in the Gemara, I think. And that's that. There is now a discussion, the bottom page 666 through page 667, about how long will the Messianic era last, and in true Talmudic form. There are numerous opinions expressed, each one, of course, validated with a verse of Scripture. One opinion says that it will last for 40 years. Some say it will last for 70 years. Some say for 3 generations. Some say they can have Mashiach at all because he already came in the days of Hezekiah, king of Israel. But the Gemara says, wait a second. You have the prophecies of Zechariah from the Second Temple period about a future date, so it couldn't have been Hezekiah because it didn't happen that way. And some say again that the Messianic era will last for 400 years. Others say it will last for 365 years. Some say it will last for 7,000 years. All of these numbers are not calculations or predictions. They're not meant to be understood literally, but rather they are expressions of a moral and ethical point. And that's how we have to look at it. So, ultimately and inevitably, once humanity evolves into the greater world which we can expect, what will happen? How long will it last? Who knows? Because ultimately beyond that, there is still yet another tomorrow. Now, let's focus on the rewards of the Messianic era here on page 667. Rabbi Chiya ben Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, all the good things the prophets prophesied refer only to the Messianic era. But the day after the Messianic era, which is called the world to come, quoting Isaiah 64:3, no eye except yours, O God, has seen that which you will do for the one who awaits him. Now, the order supposedly is like this. We go through the evolutionary period, the close of this era and the dawn of the new, the Messianic era. The Messianic era proceeds for however long it's meant to proceed, until eventually it too comes to an end. Apocalyptically, well, when you read Isaiah and it says, I saw a new heavens and a new earth, some say there's going to be an absolute cleansing or transition from one form of life to another. And like this verse says, no one really understands what that means. When you get into the Kabbalistic secret of what we call the cosmic sabbaticals, or the Shemitot, which spoke about the continuous evolution of life in the universe, pre-Adamic civilizations, our civilization, to eventually a post-Adamic civilization. We speak of something very unique, referred to as the resurrection of the dead. And our sages are emphatic that that is part and parcel of our Torah faith, and to deny it, some say, makes you an apostate of the Torah religion. They're very emphatic about that. That the ultimate goal of life, the universe, everything, isn't the number 42 like Mr. Douglas Adams would have written in his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but is this resurrection. But what is a resurrection? Seems to have been a big deal. Still is, but even though most people don't think about it. What it means is the ultimate accomplishment of the final goal. That even the Messianic era is an evolutionary process to something that goes beyond. Now here is a little interesting tidbit, not of Talmudic origin, but of a later origin, which we find in the writings of Rabbi Avraham Azulai, which I originally translated for my book Call Upon My Name, way back when in 1992, 20 years ago, and I have it available in many other forms, in much of my other literature. I think it's even on KosherTorah.com. That when the Messiah comes, there is going to be such a terrible Holocaust in the Holy Land that there will only be 7,000 righteous left. Again, 7,000 is a symbolic number, like the number that were the righteous in the days of Elijah the prophet. And that ultimately they are going to transcend out of their physical form into what we call their astral form. And they will have bodies like Elijah's translation to an angel, or Enoch's translation to an angel. That this group will eventually ascend and they will become the governors with Mashiach, whereas everyone else will come and use the Messianic era to evolve to that point that they have already accomplished. And then at the end of the Messianic era comes what we call the Great Resurrection of all living and dead, as it is. This reference here to those being transcended at this time of the coming of Mashiach is the original Jewish source of that which the Christians have come to call the rapture. Now, I admit we're a little bit out of our Talmudic base here, but you should just know this for reference. Because Paul, I believe it was in his book of Corinthians, makes mention of the people being changed in the twinkle of an eye, and based upon that simple phrase, Christianity has developed doctrine upon doctrine and teaching upon teaching about this rapture. Post-tribulation rapture, pre-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture. The tribulation is their word for these birth pangs of the Messiah, period. And it has become very popular Christian reading today. I believe a number of very, very famous Christian novels are all based upon this, and I think you find this concept expressed in much of Christian literature, entertainment, and the like. Well, it's not for me to tell them what to or not to believe, but ultimately, it's not based on a very grounded theological source. But anyway, Rabbi Yochanan, who was here saying about this great transformation in the time to come, he disagrees with Shmuel. Because Shmuel says, the only real difference between this world and the time of the Messiah is that the Jewish people are going to be free from foreign domination. Now, the rationalist school of Jewish thought desperately want to embrace this view of Shmuel because it's the only thing that makes any sense to them. They can't wrap their heads around this cosmic, archetypal, quantum transformation at the fundamental level of human consciousness and therefore the world as we know it. So, for those people who say, well, it's going to be a natural progression into a period of peace. Well, there are a lot of people in the world today who want a natural progression into a period of peace. And you can go and look at all the world conspiracy theories about the Illuminati and the Bilderbergs and those Freemasons and those Catholics, and let's not forget the Jews, and everybody else who's out to try to take over the world. Good gosh, you got so many people trying to take over the world. They should all get together on an island and duke it out. But on a serious note, putting all this nonsense aside, Shmuel's opinion is very pragmatic. It is not necessarily shared not only by the authors of the Apocalypse who foresaw a great change. All the mystics foresaw a great change. So what on earth is Shmuel getting at? Because he's talking to address what a Messiah is supposed to be. He's not a savior from your sins. He's not an usher in of a new evolutionary phase of humanity. He's a king, a military, political leader. He establishes a government. He establishes, forgive the term, a new world order. Maybe that's why the coming of Armilos, who we call the Antichrist in the Christian tradition, is going to be embraced by so many because they're going to think that's exactly what Mashiach is supposed to be. And conspiracy theories and that really get wild. But for another time. So, to continue here. Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan's name, that all the prophets prophesied only about the reward for the penitent. But the reward for the completely righteous, that applies to the verse, no eye except yours, O God, has seen. So ultimately, those who are frail human beings like you and I, we're at one level, and those who are completely, perfectly righteous, who have never sinned, according to this opinion, are on a higher level than us. But Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rabbi Abahu. Because Rabbi Abahu said in the name of Rav, that the place where the penitent stands is so sublime that even the righteous cannot attain it. And he quotes the pasuk from Isaiah 57:19, peace to the far and to the near, and that the far come before the near. What is meant by the far? One who was far from God, but then repented. And what is meant by the near? One who was originally near to God before and still is near now. Rabbi Yochanan, however, said that the far refers to a person who is far away from sin. Near refers to a person who is near sin, but is now far away from it. So in Rabbi Yochanan's view, the righteous take precedence over the penitent. But in the other view, the Baal Tshuva, and this is a reference to another teaching in the Talmud, that the place where what we call the Baal Tshuva rise, the pure righteous cannot stand. I think that is a much more stable, psychological and spiritual position. Because ultimately, one who has never experienced temptation does not know exactly what it is. They're almost like, if you will, a virgin. A virgin is one without experience. Whereas someone who's gone through the hard times knows what experience is, and therefore is a hard-torn veteran. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, certainly Joseph and his brothers, Moses, Aharon, David and Solomon. These are guys who are not perfect. And that's why they serve as the great role models for us. So that is the future. That is what it holds. That is where I am going to conclude our teachings from the tractate Sanhedrin. In the time that we have left, I want to share with you two other things. One is from tractate Sotah, from our book here, the Finkel edition, page 484. It is also titled here about the anarchy before the coming of the Messiah. It's a review of things that we've already learned. At the end of the exile, before the coming of the Messiah, when the footsteps of the Messiah can be heard, insolence will increase, inflation will soar, the vine will yield its fruit, but wine will be expensive. The dominant power in the world will promote the denial of God. No one will approve one another, because everyone will be guilty. The meeting place of the sages will be used for morality. The Galilee will be destroyed, and the Gablan will become desolate. And we discussed all of this in one of our previous lessons in this series, so I don't need to go into it again. The people who live on the border will go around begging from town to town and will not be pitied. The wisdom of the Torah's scholars will rot. Those who fear sin will be despised, and the truth will be hidden. Young people will shame old men, and old men will stand before youngsters. A son will degrade his father, a daughter will rebel against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be members of his own household. A son will not be ashamed before his father. At such a time, on whom can one rely? Only upon one's Father in heaven. That ultimately sums up what this period is all about. If you remember how we learned that if we don't repent, God will set an evil king over us, and whose decrees will be so bad. Because ultimately, if we're meant to rely upon a higher power, whether you want to refer to it as kneeling before God, or reflecting within and unleashing your own inner power, it's kind of more or less the same thing, really. What hinders us most in accomplishing that? It's exactly the same hindrance I find when I try to teach people meditation. The hardest thing I have to teach people, the hardest thing that I really can't teach people, I've tried, is to teach them how to let go. How to let go of everything that you think is so important. All of our lives are fleeting. I am almost certain that every one of us eventually is going to die. Maybe one of us, you, not me, would ever achieve a merit like Elijah the prophet and ascend to heaven, translate. Well, that happens. Cool, but that doesn't happen every now and then, every day. My point is, you can't take it with you. And the more attachments that we have to this world, the harder they will be to give up, whether it's in the grave or in the period of the Messianic travails. Again, this was one of the teachings of Abraham Azulai in his book Hesed L'Avraham, that during the period of the great travails, it's going to be very hard on those who are so attached to everything. Everything isn't just your financial or your possessions. It's your ideas, your concepts, and your beliefs that this is how everything must be. Well, you want to know something? Life and reality don't always agree and follow the way you think or I think it should be. And therefore, as such, we have to learn to let go. When I try to teach people meditation, I say, learn to let go. I'm always, what does it mean? What does it mean? I say, I could tell you words, but it's not a verbal or a cognitive or a theological or a philosophical concept. It's an experience of freedom in movement. I remember many, many years ago when I was demonstrating the meditative teachings to one of my students. And I would show them that, like the biblical prophet period, meditation is great to start to music. And people have this mistaken idea that your meditation music should be this calm, quieting, peaceful music. And I say, oh, baloney. Put on the hardest, heaviest metal you can find. Steppenwolf, Deep Purple, those are my favorites. And let loose. Just a little bit of personal revelation here. One of my personal best meditative songs is Steppenwolf's Magic Carpet Ride. And I can go on, and that put me out of this world. And I demonstrated to this student. The student looked at me in awe and said, I've never seen somebody so free other than someone who's like on drugs. And I said, I don't do drugs. But I do know how to let go. I've been kicked in the butt and smashed in the teeth so many times in my life that I've had no choice but to let go. And I've learned that as I let go, you might remember that old faith game. You're surrounded by a whole bunch of your friends, and then you close your eyes and lean back, and it's your friend's jobs to catch you. They're not supposed to drop you. Well, I kind of played that game with heaven. And I don't necessarily look to drop to test heaven. But I know that every time I, symbolically speaking, lose my footing, somehow, somewhere, heaven's always there to catch me. That's not my faith. That's my experience. So going through the rough and hard times to come, yeah, they're there. But, I don't know. What are we going to keep? What are we going to lose? I'm often approached and asked by people, well, Rabbi, should we prepare for the hard times to come survivalist style? That's an appropriate thing to discuss now in the conclusion of this material. Because you know something? Prepare all you want. Build the greatest stronghold you got. Get your guns. Get everything. Be ready to take on the army. And you could be walking to your place and, God forbid, slip on a banana peel, have a heart attack, get stung by a bee, find that you have an allergy. Or in other words, if God wants you down, somehow, some way, no matter how much you prepare, you're going down. But don't think of that negatively. Why? Because there's a positive other side. If God wants you up, no matter how much you want to fall, He's going to hold you up. So if you face the end of days, you wake up in the morning and look outside, and gee, that looks like a big mushroom cloud over downtown. Gee, how come it's so hot outside? It feels like it's 200 degrees. And you can get a crackling radio station that just said World War III started and half the world got blown up. Well, God wants you through that, and then I guess you're going to get through it. And somehow, some way, you're going to survive. It's all a matter of your mentality. And it's on that note that I want to conclude about the quantum concept of perception. This is the secret of bringing the Messiah. Baba Metzia, page 539, in our book here, Finkel edition, and under the section called An Attempt to Bring Messiah. Listen to this story. Now, granted, this is probably one of these legendary stories. I don't know or believe that this is historical, but yet it is teaching us a lesson about the nature of where, using the words of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, Eifu Adam Choshev Sham Hu, or in other words, where a person thinks, that's where he's at. Elijah used to appear often in the yeshiva of Rebbe, who was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the author of the Mishnah. One day it was Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the new moon, and Rebbe waited for Elijah, but he didn't come. So when he did come, Rebbe asked him, where have you been? Why didn't you come until now? So Eliyahu replied, I was busy. I had to wake up Abraham, from the grave in Machpelah. I had to wash his hands, allow him to pray, and then he would have to go to sleep afterwards. And then I had to do the same to Isaac and again to Jacob. Again, symbolic talk. We don't have to get into the details here. So Rebbe says, well, why don't you wake them all up at the same time? So here's the setup. So Elijah says, well, if they all prayed together, they would inject so much mercy into the world that Mashiach would come before his time. And that's why I'm not allowed to wake them all up at the same time. This is not a literal story. Don't worry about it. What the ethical point is that the focus of consciousness, strength in numbers and everything else, is so powerful that literally the input of an individual or a small group of people, kind of like you, can change the world. If truly your heart and your mind are one in the knowledge and truth of God. That is what we call emunah, faith. So Rebbe says to Eliyahu, hey, that's pretty cool. Is there anyone alive now that can arouse such heavenly mercy with his prayers? So Eliyahu says, well, yeah, there's Rabbi Chiya and his sons. So immediately, Rebbe says, let's fast, proclaims a fast. And Rabbi Chiya and his sons are going to be asked to lead the service. So Rabbi Chiya starts to pray the standard Amidah, the Shemona Esrei prayer. And he gets to the words, right? Mashiv Haruach, which translates as, he makes the winds blow. And the focus of Rabbi Chiya and his prayers is so real, like Eliyahu Navi in the prophetic traditions, which I discussed, in the prophetic teachings, how in your mind, when you say something, your words are to be a projection of what is in your mind, and what is in your mind is supposed to become real. So, as Rabbi Chiya says the words, who makes the winds blow, the words began to blow. And then he said the next words, Umorid HaGeshem, who makes the rains descend. And as he said the words, it began to rain. However, when he was about to say, continuing the prayer, Baruch atah Hashem, mechayeh hamatim, blessed are you who revives the dead. Gosh, if he had said those words, what would have happened? It says here that the world began to shudder. And they said in heaven, who has revealed this secret to the world that Rabbi Chiya could bring Mashiach? Who was it who showed and exposed that Rabbi Chiya was put in a position of public leading of prayer? His focus, his psychic energy was so simplistically pure to not entertain a other belief that anything but this could happen. So, needless to say, they all point to Eliyahu. He said it. So, It says here, they concludes, they brought Eliyahu and gave him 60 flaming lashes. Again, symbolic. It's the same thing they said they gave to the angel Metatron when Elisha Acher mistakenly thought that he was God. Then Eliyahu came down, and he appeared in the form of a fiery bear and chased everybody away from praying so as to confuse them so it would not materialize. Okay, that's a nice story, but it is based upon a sound psychological principle. Don't fear the future. Don't worry about all the things to come and what's going down. We read the newspapers every day. I don't know what the newspapers on June 27th, 2013, a year from now, are going to say. Maybe they'll say things worse than today. Maybe they'll say things better. I don't know. But you want to know something? I can look back to June 2002. I don't think things were really that much better then than now, or that things today are that much worse. What's it going to be like on June 27th in 2022? I don't know. But you want to know something? One thing I do believe. God's with us. If we keep our eyes on heaven, I'm assured heaven will keep its eye on us. So on that note, let's conclude. All the teachings of the Messianic predictions. Whatever's going to be will be. But if we do what's right, then what's right will be done by us. I'm your host, Ariel Bar Tzadok. Find me online at KosherTorah.com. Thank you all for joining me. I hope to see you all in our next class. Good night, all. Shalom. 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 Good night, all. Shalom.